Hello, and thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Mike Tellerino. I'm the CEO of K9 for Veterans. Tonight we're going to discuss the case of Special Warfare Operator Edward Gallagher. Most of you probably have followed this on the news. Gallagher is a service member that is currently facing multiple charges and potential war crimes, including murder, for which, if found guilty, he could face life in prison for the death penalty. Gallagher has served 19 years. Originally from Indiana, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy in 1999. The last 14 years of his career, he has been a member of the highly regarded Navy SEALs. As of the first half of 2018, Gallagher completed 8 deployments in various combat zones. On multiple occasions, he has been recognized for his valor and heroism in combat as a recipient of 2 bronze medals as well as other medals and citations for meritorious service. Now, on this show, we're always striving to support our nation's heroes, men and women who choose to risk their lives in order to protect our freedoms and way of life should always be held in high regard. Over the next 2 shows, we will strive to give a breakdown of the military court system and what information is currently out there, and some perspective as to what it's like to be a soldier on the ground. We seek to be impartial and fair, but to recognize that we are human and our biases may affect how we speak and view this topic. Tonight we have Alex Michael, an attorney, and John Jans, a veteran. We encourage our viewers to call in with any questions they may have regarding the content of our show. Alex, all members of the United States military are subject to a separate set of rules, right?
Yes, that's correct. There's a separate court system. It's a military court system. It's somewhat similar to what you and I would go to, but it has its own separate rules. It's strictly for military individuals.
Give us a basic description of the military code of justice.
That's kind of a loaded question. There's a number of different areas. Can you be a little more specific?
Well, I mean, there's separate rules in court for when you're being tried by the military as opposed when you're being tried in a civilian court.
Right. Well, okay. I mean, to kind of give you an idea, in civil or in criminal courts for civilians, there's a jury, and that jury is selected in part by the prosecutor and by your own defense counsel. It's made up from a jury panel. In military court, that's not the case. The jurors are just appointed, and you have really no say in that system. They're usually military officers, and there's nothing you can do about picking who they are.
So it's preset.
It's preset, yeah.
Can a service member be subject to both military and civilian justice?
I'm not really 100% sure on that. But usually, if somebody is charged in the military courts, it would usually stay in the military courts as far as.
So there's no double jeopardy or.
If you're asking about the same crime,
right?
Then it would strictly be confined to military courts. You wouldn't be tried in the military courts and then.
So you couldn't be tried in the military court and then have the civilian court come back and say, "Oh, we're going to charge you as well."
There are actually very complicated rules on double jeopardy that are probably beyond the scope of this conversation, but for our purposes today, generally speaking, you would be tried in military courts and not in civilian courts.
When you're being tried, John, rules of engagement. You were a Marine. Tell us a little bit about your background.
So I was Marine Corps. I was in the Marine Corps in 2004 to 2008. In 2005 and 2006, I was over in Ramadi, Iraq. It was some of the worst fighting in the country at the time, and rules of engagement are shady
at best.
At best, we had some standing orders in certain areas where we were getting a lot of IEDs. That anybody puts anything down on this stretch of road, you can shoot them. And doesn't matter if it's grandma waiting for the bus, she puts her bags down, or kids playing with toys that drop them down. That's how significant the IED threat was. Other times, they would change daily. We would get word, or we'd get tips from someone saying, hey, the insurgents today are going to be wearing sandals, or they'll be wearing running shoes. So if you see anybody in running shoes, try and grab them. If you can't grab them, shoot them. It would change the next day to anybody wearing tan, if they're wearing tan pajamas, and they would change day to day. So the rules of engagement for us, and this is just as regular infantry, was pretty wide open. The special forces guys have another set that they go by that they've got everything from kill capture list, where anybody that's on this list is fair game. If you can't capture them, you can kill them anytime, anywhere. Go for it. It's really just situation dictates.
So, in the heat of a firefight, okay? I mean, you're under stress. You're all depressed, and you know, and just, I mean, that's got to be you know, you have to make a quick second decision in some cases. Shoot, don't shoot.
Mm-hmm. That's what you're trained for, though. That's exactly why we spend the billions of dollars a year training our military, and when to and when not to shoot. Sure, there's going to be accidents and collateral damage, but that's expected. Again, this is war. We're not. It's not the police going out. It's in this case, it's a Navy SEAL team going to kill capture well, they didn't kill capture. It was we'll get to the what it was in a second, but go on. Sorry, Mike.
That's okay. Alex, let's begin with the investigative process. The military has its own police. Most people are aware of this, but each individual branch has their own specific police. Am I right?
Yeah, so just like how you have separate jurisdictions in your local police, you would have a separate jurisdiction for the military. It's simply because they're the most familiar with that community, for lack of a better word. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's...
In specific case, allegations were made, an investigation had begun, followed by an arrest, and then an Article 32 hearing, which is basically an indictment. Article 32.
Well, an Article 32 hearing is kind of more like a preliminary hearing where actually a defendant is afforded the opportunity to...
You're brought up on charges.
Right, you're brought up on charges,
Right.
But you're actually given an opportunity to present witnesses and have a say in the process. Whereas, you know, in civilian criminal courts,
hearing?
the first step would kind of be a grand jury in the case of a felony, where a defendant would actually not even be present, and in some cases wouldn't even know that the grand jury proceeding was taking place in order to get the indictment. So an Article 32 hearing actually kind of gives military members a little more rights in that sense than a civilian court.
It's my understanding that he's being held without bond right now until his hearing. The difference between, I guess, a civilian court and a military court is in a civilian court, you're afforded the opportunity for bail.
Well, you are...
In most cases.
You're afforded the right to bond or no bond in military court, whereas there's no middle ground. You either are released or you're not.
Why wouldn't you be released? I guess I don't
Well,
get it.
if you're a flight risk or a danger to the community, in those instances, they would not release you. So if they are not releasing you, they feel that you are either susceptible to not coming back to court and answering for the charges, or that you are a danger to the community.
We're talking about a veteran who served how many years?
Go over the charges.
You know,
Against him.
Special Forces, Navy SEAL, accommodations beyond belief, and you know they're holding him with no bond. family men, kids. I mean, what's the justification of that, I guess?
Well,
In a civilian court, that probably wouldn't have never happened.
Well, in civilian court, there's a middle ground where you can be afforded bail. So if they believe that you are a risk or a danger to the community, they can mitigate that by holding, a sum of money that you will feel is sufficient enough for you to come back for, that you won't escape or cause more problems.
Right.
In the military system, if they feel that danger can't be addressed by just simply letting you go, then they will hold you. What the specific facts that this judge rested on, I mean, I guess we're not really privy to
Right.
what that is. And unless I know exactly what facts the judge was resting his opinion on, I couldn't offer you a more detailed discussion here. But again, it does seem a little extreme to hold somebody who has 19 years of service.
It's my understanding they arrested him while he was in the hospital convalescing. They raided his home, almost with a SEAL team, to gather evidence. Again, I guess I don't get it.
Can we go over what he's charged with?
Yeah, we're gonna do
Okay,
that
we're
now.
gonna hit that. Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna do that right now.
Part of it.
He's charged with. Let me get there. Make sure I got my
I don't think
facts.
it's on these papers. Well, I understand one of the charges was murder, correct?
Yeah, murder.
Okay. Among other things.
So
Right.
there was an ISIS combatant that was injured in a fight with the Iraqi army. He was getting medical attention, and there's actually two different versions of what happened at that point. He's getting tried because one SEAL, one of his fellow SEALs, said that while they were providing medical attention, Gallagher walked up, stabbed him in the neck and in the abdomen with a hunting blade, and killed him. Another report from the Iraqi general that was on scene during the entire event said he was dead before his team left, before the Iraqis left him to the SEALs. So he died of a gunshot wound, and there's
So there's
That's
a
my
lot of
understanding.
conflicting stories as to exactly what happened. From what I understand, the medic that was actually attending the injured said that never happened. But yet there's several different accounts from other soldiers that were there who said it did happen. So I guess it's just going to have to be sorted out. But it just doesn't make any sense to me. He's set to face a court-martial on May 28th. As of yesterday, his trial date was postponed until May 28th. That's when it's postponed till. Talk to me about the people who will be presented and presiding over this process. How does that process work?
Well, that process, it's a trial. You would have a judge, and you would have a prosecutor, and you would have defense attorneys, and you would have military members who would act as the jury or the finder of fact, in which case they would be the ones determining guilt or innocence. A judge is there to make rulings on laws and objections. And when you have a defense attorney, you can have a civilian attorney and a JAG attorney, which is a military attorney. The JAG attorney has some more restrictions imposed on them, as far as speaking to the public and whatnot, that a civilian attorney would not have. But you are entitled to have both, whereas, in a civilian setting, you would, if you hired a private attorney, you would no longer have the government-appointed one, like the public defender.
Okay. Now, another question I have, when we have a criminal case here in the States, you could disregard certain jurors based on certain prejudices. You have the right.
You have the right to
Cross-examine them or talk to them.
talk to them and figure out whether or not you want this juror on your on your jury because you may feel that this juror may be for or against you.
Right.
You are not, however, allowed to make decisions based solely on race or gender
Right.
or any protected
But
grounds.
you don't
such as
have that in the military court.
No, you don't.
I mean, the panel is set, that's it, you don't get to question them at all.
No, they're set and they are who they are. You are just judged by those individuals who are given before you, and there's, really, in my sense, that's a little, to me, that strikes me as unconstitutional.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean,
Because,
prejudicial, I mean, if you've got the wrong person sitting there,
right, you don't have a chance to
challenge them.
to figure out whether or not this person has a bias for or against
Right.
you. Right, and so when you have a jury in a civilian criminal case, the purpose of questioning that jury, it's called voir dire. You're allowed to figure out whether or not someone would have a prejudice against you, and whether they could remain impartial. That's a constitutional right, and if you can't do that, it strikes me as a little contrary to our country's fundamental principle in our
Right.
founding document,
Right.
that every person is entitled to a jury of their peers, and an impartial jury at that.
Unbelievable. So there's quite a difference between a military court and a civilian court. John, again, getting back to being in the heat of battle, making that split-second decision, okay? A soldier could take an action. Some people could see it one way, and some people can see it and interpret it as another way.
I guess a situation like that, there's a curfew. There was a curfew every night. As soon as it turned dark, no one was allowed to be on the streets. And if you were, we'd shoot on sight. And it was well known throughout the city. Yet there were several occasions where we would see somebody moving down the street, maybe 200-300 meters away, and start shooting at them. I don't think on any of those occasions we actually hit anybody. Luckily, we'd go and search the house or the compound where they walked in, and it turned out to be teenagers trying to sneak over to their friends' houses or something along those lines, and that could be seen as, horrible had we actually hit any of them.
Right. How often do the rules of engagement change? I mean, is it a directive daily, weekly, monthly? I mean, one day you're allowed to do this, the next day you're allowed to do that.
They could change same day, depending
Same
on your
day.
mission.
So it's just something that,
You go on 3 or 4 missions in a day. You have different objectives for each of them. You could have different rules of engagement for each of them.
and how do those directives come down?
We'd get word just like any other order comes down. I don't know where it starts, but we get it from our superiors and they get it from theirs.
So one day doing this may be legal, the next day doing something else is illegal. So I mean, how do you keep up with that? I mean, it's got to be, when the rules change that often.
It's not that difficult to keep up with the changing ROEs. Especially in the heat of the moment, you're thinking about that because your ass is on the line if something happens. If you make a mistake, then you are going to be held accountable for it. We know this, so we try to make as few mistakes as possible.
Alex, being tried in a military court, as we know, is much different than being tried in our court system. You're not afforded the same opportunities. By keeping him sequestered and away from, his attorneys, and they said that he has limited access to his attorneys. Is there anything that can be done for that,
Well, the military court system is a lot more difficult in that sense. Whether something can be done, I'm not sure at this time, but I think there needs to be a constitutional challenge made here because, there's a Sixth Amendment right to counsel, and any individual is entitled to have an attorney, and if your opportunity to speak and communicate with your counsel is limited, it's going to be a lot harder to defend your case.
Can you have a military attorney and also a civil attorney at the same time represent you in the military court?
Yeah, we as I was saying earlier, that's one of the differences. You can have two. You can have both attorneys, and which is the JAG attorney and the private attorney. Whereas in civilian court, you would not be afforded the right to have both the public defender and a private attorney. If you wanted multiple attorneys, you would have to pay for multiple private attorneys.
I've actually got a question.
Go ahead.
So he was arrested while he was at a doctor appointment. He was seeking treatment for traumatic brain injury, which he's had 8 deployments. 7 of them he was fine. It was his last one that his team said he started going a little crazy. And
Allegedly.
You're talking about Gallagher.
Gallagher, yes.
Yeah, allegedly. Let's
Allegedly.
clarify that.
That's what some of his team members said.
Right.
Had a brain injury, a traumatic brain injury, been the cause of his erratic actions?
That would be
His
a
alleged
defense.
his alleged actions.
Right.
How would he go about?
Well, that would be a defense, I would think, right?
Right. So if your cause for committing the crimes, if that's the reason that you're giving is that you had a brain injury and you couldn't think clearly, well, at that point, that's for the finder of fact to determine whether or not your critical thinking was impaired to the point where you were not making a conscious choice, but rather, a choice that was by
John,
impairment.
How does that affect him in the court ruling, though?
as a defense?
As well as a defense, or yeah, as a defense, let's say.
Well, I guess if you were convicted, if you were up on charges and you were, as we know, have PTSD and you were having a PTSD episode and you committed that crime, you could blame it or allege that the reason why you committed that crime was because, not that it's an offense, but...
Well, no, it wouldn't be. First of all, I don't like the word blame. It would, if it was genuinely because of the PTSD, then you did not make a conscious choice. You could be found not guilty based on because when there's an intent element to a crime like murder, where you intentionally choose to deprive someone of their life, if you were not in your right mind and you couldn't make a conscious choice, at that point there is no intent and you are not guilty of the crime. Maybe you could be
by insanity.
Right. It's similar to the insanity defense to some degree. So that it would be an outright defense.
Okay. So that's one of the other things. As he's being detained, he's not being allowed to seek medical attention, and he's been in isolation for a while, and it's just a.
You think people are rushing
it's a
to
shame.
judgment on this, or do you think, should he be given the benefit of a doubt because of his military record, or do you think people are just...
I think special operators shouldn't have reports written on them. There should be no news about what our special operations community does. If they mess up, that's for their higher-ups to decide and reprimand them. But for this to be
I guess I don't get
national-
a guy with his record, 8 deployments, all the accommodations and everything, and all of a sudden now he's accused of this horrific crime. And people are so willing to rush to judgment, about him.
Well, everyone is entitled to the presumption of innocence.
Right, exactly.
You're innocent until proven guilty, and I mean, you don't need a lawyer to tell you that. That's. I think
But this
everyone
guy's
knows
out
that.
there fighting for our freedom every day under immense pressure. And because of an action that hasn't been proven, there's people out there rushing. I think we, as a public, need to wait till all the facts are in to get all the information before anybody makes an opinion.
Oh, absolutely.
Again,
I
the allegations are being made by one member of his team who,
Right.
After reading more about this guy, it seems to be more of a grudge than anything, and he was actually the individual that's being alleged, that's alleging he saw everything, said there was he did an interview with NCIS a few months prior where NCIS asked if he had any crimes to report, and the individual said no. And here a few months later, here he is accusing him of murder, war
Now,
crimes.
Alex, why do they place a gag order on this?
Well, before I answer that question, I'd like to just clarify something that you said. I mean, if I understood you correctly from earlier, you said that there were two versions of this story.
There's multiple versions.
Well, okay. I mean, is there any dispute that he actually did kill the individual?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
So there's dispute whether or not he
He
actually
committed the crime.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So it's not just a question of what the circumstances were. Okay. All right. Fair enough. I understand. I'm sorry. What was your question again?
A gag order. We have 1 minute to go, and remember, we're going to continue this next week. We're going to get into more of the specifics of the crime rather than the legality of what Gallagher is facing. Okay. So a gag order, real brief.
I mean, a gag order can be put in place for many reasons, but I mean, a lot of times, especially with sensitive military information, you may not want that information leaking to the public. Sometimes there's
prejudicial?
Right, for prejudice purposes, for national security purposes, whatever the reason may be, there could be a number of reasons that a judge would keep us from knowing some of the information. And someday maybe we'll have all the facts, but right now all we can do is speculate on what the facts may be.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. We will be back with our next broadcast, and it'll be more into the actual event itself that took place. Alex Michael will be with us again. Jonathan Jans will be joining us. Veteran Jonathan Jans will be joining us for another show. So, again, let's not rush to judgment. Let's give this soldier a fair shake. Let's see where this all turns out to be. What it is what it is. So, thank you for tuning in tonight, and we'll see you at our next broadcast. Thank you.